What's up everybody? Nate here. So the housing market in the United States is headed for a huge shift as we're starting to see market conditions essentially flip on their side. For the second straight week in a row, mortgage applications dropped in the United States, and actually by February 24th, 2022, mortgage applications hit a new 2-year low. Not only that, but we're starting to see home values spiral higher and higher and pretty much are out of control at this point. And on top of that, inventory for homes is at a record low as well. So essentially what you have going on right now is no buyers, low inventory, and housing prices at an all-time high. What I could tell you is one of those three things is gonna have to change in 2022. So today I want to talk all about what is going on in the housing market right now. In addition, I'm gonna be breaking down what this could all mean for the future of the housing market and how that is all going to affect our economy in 2022. But before I break all of this down, do me a quick favor and hit, smash, or destroy that thumbs up button below. And ring that notification bell too. Both of those two things are completely free and they help to show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. Thank you so much for doing that, and now let's talk all about what's happening in the housing market right now. So applications for people to get a mortgage actually decreased by around 13.1% last week. This is the second straight week that they've declined like this. They actually dropped by around 10% the week before. Those are huge drops, and they're showing that buyers are essentially disappearing from the housing market right now. But I thought everybody wanted a house, right? Well, over the past 2 years, yeah, millions of Americans have wanted to get into a house. The problem is the price to get a home is just way too high right now. In fact, the number of cities with home values of around $1 million or more tripled in 2021, which means houses aren't just getting more expensive, they're getting crazy expensive, and they're almost completely unaffordable for most Americans. That's a big issue, because what do most Americans do when they can't afford something but they want it anyway? Well, the majority of Americans in that situation would just go ahead and finance that purchase. However, financing and mortgage rates are out of control right now too. The average interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage is actually over 4% right now. And that's for homes that are worth $647,000 or less. So most of our houses. Which means because home values are going up so high right now and interest rates for mortgages are so high, even the majority of Americans are completely tapped out of the housing market and they're just exiting. So now you have a housing market that is absent of buyers and is just filled with sellers trying to sell their home. And that's kind of a problem because there's really no point in selling your home if nobody's going to buy it. So now we have to talk about low inventory in the housing market. You have low inventory in the housing market for a few different reasons. In 2021 and in 2020, people bought so many homes, and they were able to do so because of the Federal Reserve and the federal government. The Federal Reserve dropped its benchmark interest rates to 0%. This made it easy for home buyers to get a mortgage. Rates were so low that they were going to save hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of their loan. Not only that, but the federal government paused mandatory payments on rent and federal student loans and even mortgages in 2020 and in 2021. And finally, the federal government and Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars in stimulus. So they basically just gave Americans thousands of dollars, which a lot of Americans used as their starter home fund. So Americans bought houses like crazy, and eventually that led to low inventory because people just couldn't put their houses on the market fast enough. And simply because of supply and demand, there was just way more demand to buy a house than there were houses on the market. Now demand is starting to go down because housing prices have gotten way out of control, but also there's just no inventory. And we're starting to build more houses in the United States, but definitely not fast enough to meet demand. Even when those houses hit the market, they are super overinflated in value. That's led the majority of people who were going to put their house on the market to not do so in 2022 and instead renovate or fix up the house that they live in currently instead of going out and buying a new one. And we could start to see signs of this in 2022 because Lowe's and Home Depot have raised their earnings forecast this year. It was kind of assumed that those two companies were going to start dropping revenue and earnings in 2022 because our economy was starting to improve. improve. People weren't staying inside anymore like they were in 2020. That's part of the reason why those companies have boomed. Instead, people are going to Lowe's and Home Depot and buying paint and lumber and anything else that they need to make their home better instead of buying a new one. Which means sellers are not putting their house on the market anymore, and they're staying in their home much longer than they might have anticipated. But they're also potentially adding some value to their house, which in turn could just make the housing market go up even more. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, one of those three things is gonna have to change in 2022. The market can't just continue exactly the same as it is now forever. So which is it going to be? Are housing prices going to continue to rise? Are more buyers going to enter the housing market? Or are housing values eventually going to go back down? Well, so let's address the first one here. Are more buyers going to enter the housing market? Well, the only reason that you'd see more buyers entering the housing market is if there's a reason for them to do so. Buyers right now can't afford the houses on the market, and they certainly can't afford a mortgage for one because interest rates are steadily going back up. Not only that, but inflation is ravaging our economy right now. In fact, in January 2022, inflation hit a new over 40-year high of around 7.5%. That has super bad implications for markets and our economy in general, but for everyday average Americans, it means they won't be able to buy all of the same things because the value of our money is going down. And in turn, the buying power goes down because the price of everything is going up. You now need way more money to buy all of the same things. And that hurts Americans a lot because now they can't budget for a brand new house because they have no extra money. And on top of that, wages are nowhere near keeping up with inflation right now. So Americans, while some of them are getting new jobs and a lot of them are getting pay increases, it's still not enough in order to afford everything right now. Prices are getting way too crazy. And in 2022, stimulus measures are gone. The mortgage moratorium program is gone, and federal student loan payments are set to return in May of this year. So Americans aren't getting that free money anymore like they were in 2020 and in 2021. So there's just no money for them to go out and buy a house that is way overinflated in value. I mean, right now, if a house is put on the market for $100,000, it may end up selling for $110,000 or $120,000 or even $150,000. That is a big increase, and for most Americans, they just simply can't afford that. Housing prices are not affordable for everyone right now. And that situation is probably only going to get worse because the Federal Reserve has talked about raising its benchmark interest rates in 2022. Remember, in 2020, they dropped them to 0. Now, they're going to raise them probably 3 to 5 times this year. They might be around 50 basis points every single time, meaning we could see interest rates go from around 0% to almost 1 or 2% by the end of this year, locking more and more buyers out of the housing market. So the answer to number 1 is most likely you're not going to see more buyers enter the housing market unless all of those conditions suddenly change. Number 2, though, are housing prices going to start dropping this year? Now, this is kind of up in the air. We don't know if housing values are going to continue to go up or if they're just going to stay at exactly where they're at right now. Home values are connected to a lot of different things. For one, it could be homeowner renovations. 2, it could be the housing market in that particular area. If a lot of houses are selling for way overinflated values, your home and a seller's home is probably going to go up in value too. And of course, it comes down to supply and demand. So individual markets may have way more demand than other markets in our country. Home values typically go up between around 2 to 5% every single year. But over the past couple of years, home values have exploded. In 2021 alone, home values went up by around 15 to 20%. And that's just in 1 year. Now, that's a big problem for a lot of Americans because when your home value goes up every single year, you ultimately pay more for your home. Even if you have a 30-year fixed mortgage, you're going to pay more for the house that you live in. And the reason for that is because taxes go up every single year. Your home's value is going to be assessed multiple times while you live in it. And every single time it's assessed, I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be assessed at a higher value. Well, with housing prices going up 20% in a single year, the amount that your home is going to be assessed for is also going to explode. Now, I will say some states actually have what's called a cap rule. This means that once you've lived in your home for a certain amount of time, the taxes on your home can only go up by a certain amount. They're capped at a specific rate. Not every state has this rule though, which means they can continue to go up uncontrollably if home values also continue to rise. My home state of Michigan actually has a cap rule on your taxes. So your property taxes can't go up more than around 4 to 5% every single year once you've lived in your house for 1 year. Even still, I recently got my new tax assessment, and now I'm going to be paying way more in taxes every single month just because my house is worth more now. And that really does mean no good except for if I go to sell my house, because now I actually can sell my house for way more than I purchased it for. However, I don't plan to sell my house anytime soon, so now I'm paying hundreds of additional dollars in property taxes simply because of overinflated property values. And my situation is just one of millions throughout the country. You're now going to have millions of homeowners paying way more to just live in their house. And remember, this is on top of inflation, so everything in our economy is going up right now. Basic goods and services are going up in price, and just to live in your house, that's going up too. Some Americans are not going to be able to afford this new increase. I mean, maybe at first, but over the span of time, a lot of Americans are going to be able to afford to pay more and more taxes just because their house is overinflated in value. That could lead a lot of Americans to either foreclose on their home or sell it altogether, which could spark up a little bit more demand, but I don't think that's going to be the case when interest rates are continuing to rise and inflation is way out of control. Both of those two things need to kind of come down a little bit in order for more buyers to start entering the market. Though it could lead to a lot of home prices coming down in value because the sellers that put their house on the market may have to drop down the price because nobody's willing to buy it for the price that it's set at. I mean, that's ultimately the true value of a home, what somebody is willing to buy it for. And right now, if somebody puts their house on the market for $100,000, they may end up selling it for $150,000. However, by the end of 2022 and into 2023, if somebody puts their house on the market for $100,000, they may sell it at that exact price, or they may sell it at $95,000 or $90,000. That's all because nobody is willing to buy it right now, and the current value of the home may end up needing to come down. Sellers are putting their house on the market so they can ultimately sell it. So they're not going to put their house way over what it's currently valued at. They're going to put it at the current market value. And if current market value says it's worth $100,000, that's what they're going to sell it for. If that changes in 2022, then you could see prices ultimately go down. But what all of this ultimately means is that we're kind of hitting a peak in the housing market right now. You have low inventory and low buyers, while you also have super high prices and interest rates going up. And while some people are still going to go out and buy homes, not everybody is going to be able to do so. Sellers want to make a profit on their house at the end of the day. I mean, you don't want to sell your home for less than what you bought it for. If that's in danger, then sellers are not going to put their house on the market anymore. And the situation we're running into is nearly no inventory and then no buyers, which means banks and financial institutions have to raise their interest rates even more because now it's risky for them to give someone a mortgage. They want to give out as many mortgages as they possibly can, but with fewer and fewer people applying for them, well, now they have to pick and choose who they actually give a mortgage to. Which means for 2022, I don't think we're going to see an outright collapse like we saw in 2007 and 2008. I think this is going to be way more subtle because housing prices, while they probably won't immediately crash, they might hit a correction territory, which means they're probably going to go down by a certain percent, or they're going to stay exactly where they're at right now. They won't really continue to rise for a long period of time because when somebody finally does enter the market, they'll buy that house for exactly what it's listed for. There's not going to be a lot of bidding wars because there's not that many people looking for a house right now. And for buyers, you kind of get what you get because there's not a ton of houses on the market either. So buyers might want to wait even if they can afford a house simply because there's not a lot of options. Meaning the housing market, while it might not crash, it's going to pretty much level level out, which means this housing frenzy is also going to cool off. In addition, we don't know what the demand for a house is going to be in the future. People have been moving out of big cities and into the suburbs for about 2 years now because of all of the economic lockdowns and social distancing orders related to the pandemic. Well, things are kind of shifting back in the opposite direction because now the pandemic is nearing its end. That could alleviate a lot of the pressure in the housing market, and we also don't know what's going to happen with the Federal Reserve and its policies in 2022. They vowed to get super aggressive with inflation, but the Russia-Ukraine situation is really complicating things. They might not be able to raise interest rates or pull a lot of their stimulus like they want to because that conflict across the world is potentially going to cause inflation to go up even more. So they don't want to restrict Americans' opportunity to buy things because spending money in the United States is the only way our economy functions. So that could continue to boost up the housing market if they don't get super aggressive with inflation either. All in all though, signs point to the housing market eventually cooling off and leveling out. Because inflation doesn't ever really go down. I mean, sometimes it does, which is super rare, but once something costs a certain price, it typically stays at that price forever. It doesn't usually go back down in value. And the same can be said for houses. So homeowners have built a lot of equity and they might just hold on to that equity for the long term and keep an eye on things for now until they finally slow down. Only then will we most likely start to see the housing market return to normal. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about the housing market completely shifting gears in 2022? Do you think the housing market is going to continue to go up forever, or do you think the housing market actually going to crash this year? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if video is more your thing, I'm putting out video breakdowns of all of the top business and financial news 7 days a week over here on this channel. And I've actually got another update for you ready right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.